Hey guys, welcome to the Unleash podcast brought to you by Hidden Gem, where we talk about how to unleash your hidden potential. I'm your host, Yuri the Origins, and we have a great episode for you today featuring Brian Pickowicz. Brian, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, awesome. Before we jump into today's topic, we would like to invite you to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. You can also find all episodes at Hidden Gem website, hiddengem.net. And if you live in the area and have not visited Hidden Gem yet, you can always grab a free trial pass at our website, hiddengem.net. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic today, Yuri. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Greg told me about your transition from bodybuilding to ultramarathon. That's a big transition right there.
Yeah, no, I mean, in all fairness, it took a little bit of time. It wasn't an automatic transition, but I was pretty into bodybuilding. I was really invested in it as a sport, and I think that after I stopped competing and I no longer had that as a vision, I just kind of stumbled my way into finding something else that allowed me to push myself. And it was certainly a blessing, and it has been a blessing since.
So, as a bodybuilder, don't like to run. So that's the first thing, right? So, did you like to run before, or did you actually learn that you like this after you kind of retired from bodybuilding?
Yeah, so my story started when I was in college. I was a high school athlete. I was a really good athlete, baseball, football, basketball, and I always ran to get in shape there. But then once I got into college, I didn't really have a lot of confidence in myself, so I started bodybuilding in order to try out for the football team. Once I had made the football team, after a year and a half, almost 3 semesters of playing, I was like, I really like the weight training more than I like the football. And I was in this position. I was working 3 jobs, 60 hours a week when I was going to school. And I was like, I'm not going to be a professional athlete in football, but I had a real passion for bodybuilding. So I was like 250 pounds playing defensive line. And I'm naturally, meaning like my set point is around 210 pounds. So I was a pretty big guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to quit the football team and pursue bodybuilding. And I was always athletic, but then obviously I transitioned to bodybuilding, it was never something where I was running. Like I might have gotten like a spurt of like, hey, I'm 8 weeks out from a contest. Why don't today's cardio just go do stairs
Right.
at like the local track or whatever. But very seldom was it that. So when I kind of found running as a result of just some people pinging me and asking me for advice, I had me and my fiance do a lot of fitness and lifestyle coaching, and I had a couple clients who were like, "Hey, I want to run a half marathon," or we had this opportunity to live with a client. We were originally from New Hampshire, moved to Los Angeles, and then a client in Dallas was like, "Hey, I'd love to have you come live with me and my family." And I was like, "That's a fantastic opportunity." He's like, "And one of my goals is to run a 5K in under 20 minutes." And I was like, I don't think I can do that. So it just kind of became this thing where there was, little things along the way that started out the process of doing the first mile and then doing the first 5K, and then it just became a habit after that.
There was any particular reason why you retired from bodybuilding, or you live the lifestyle but you just don't compete anymore?
So I'm really passionate about health. I'm really passionate about what fitness and wellness and how we move and treat our bodies, how that allows us to expand in all areas of our life. I had competed for about 4 years, and we had moved from New Hampshire. I had won, all the placings that I could as far as like, the juniors and like placed in the opens. And I'd done really well in New Hampshire. And we moved to Los Angeles to pursue like living in Los Angeles. We trained at Gold's Gym. We did the whole 9 yards and really went all in. And I just recognized in myself that there's two things. I was having conversations with people as a coach, with people about their habits and their lifestyle and their mindset and their psychology and all the things that really allowed them to not make progress. And I was like, well, I'm this 230-pound man talking about all these things with people who don't see, their aspiration isn't to look like me right now. Their aspiration to look healthy, but I just felt disjointed about the things I was really passionate about. And I was also at the point where I was at a flexion point where I said, okay, either I'm going to become someone who tries to be, my goal was to be the classic physique Mr. Olympian. So I'm like, that takes a certain lifestyle. That requires a certain sacrifice. And I just looked at, for me, I had parents and I had family members who were really sick and got really sick at a young age. And just the question of, will I be healthy enough long-term to enjoy my life? And do I want to put my health on the line in order to pursue this? It just kind of came to a head, and I recognized that I wasn't all in. And so if you're not all in on something, I think you should probably get out of the way for people who are all in, especially when we talk about a competitive sport, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a clear line. And I remember just saying, like, during my last contest prep, I was at this point where I was sitting in a sauna for an hour to lose 7 pounds in a day because I just think that my coach had his own approach, and it wasn't the healthiest. But I remember just being like, this isn't what I want my lifestyle to look like. And I just kind of stepped away from there.
And I mean, you were 230 pounds. You probably also did some sort of reverse diet and weight training and cardio differently to deload and to reduce, right?
Like after I bodybuild?
Yeah.
So
because you will not be able to do marathon, I mean, with that amount of muscle, right?
No, yeah. So this was about in 2018, I decided to stop competing. And then after that, I went through a lot of depression. I got hurt too. So I had like torn a pec, not a major tear, but enough to like, hold me back. And then I tore my bicep, and I was just getting every signal from God, from the universe that said, hey, like, this is the direction you're going to head in. And after that, it really took me a solid year and a half to the first year was getting my body back into alignment. So I worked with a physical therapist in Los Angeles. He worked with a lot of CrossFit athletes, and we specifically worked on all of my mobility imbalances. And so I had to really change the way that I trained. And I could actually keep most of it in place, but I was deadlifting almost 600 pounds. I was deadlifting 500 pounds for reps. I was, benching almost 300 pounds for reps. Like, I was really strong, and I still am strong, but I needed to get my health in alignment. And then what happened was when we moved from Los Angeles to Dallas, we lived, it's called White Rock Lake. It's this 10-mile loop that goes around the lake. And I just kind of started running it out of necessity. And there was a lot of other challenges that came up in my life. And I found that the running gave me kind of that spark again, because the time after I left bodybuilding to the time that I really found a passion for running, there was almost 2 years in between there. And I had multiple failures that were more business related and more lifestyle, like my personal life. And I remember having this one moment, I really hit a wall, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. And there was this half marathon that was going on like that week. And I was like, I really feel like I should do this. I really feel like I should do this. I feel like it just seems like for some reason I would run by the sign when I would do like 2 or 3 miles. And I just think, maybe I should run this. Maybe I should run this. And I remember I signed up for the half marathon, and I felt like that was the hardest I had ever pushed myself for the greatest amount of time. And the thing I love the most about running compared to bodybuilding is you get to see yourself a little bit differently. Like bodybuilding, you push yourself for like a minute, right? Like you might have a set that goes a minute, but then you take your rest, and then you go back in. So it's like this really interesting like dance of like you go as far as you can and as hard as you can, and then you like take your rest. And by the end of the workout, you're spent, but it's just this different thing. You don't really get to see the fringes of yourself as much. Whereas when you're running, you are just there for 2 hours. you were just there for that amount of time. And I remember just asking myself during this race, like halfway through, I was like, oh, I kind of started seeing my pace slow down. My pace slowed down. And I was like, you know what? This is great. Like, I didn't come here to win. I didn't come here to push myself. Like, I'm just going to try to get it done. And I was like, wow. Like, if you're saying to yourself that right now, where else are you saying that in your life?
Yeah.
Like, if that's your mindset, that you have to compare yourself to what someone else's do to see how well you can push yourself, I was like, that is making you weak. And I remember just like asking myself, like, how do you want to feel by the end of this? And I was like, I want to say that I put everything into this race. And so, first half marathon I ever did, I ended up finishing the last 6 miles at like a 7-minute pace. And I finished the actual race under an 8-minute mile for the total pace. And it was just this experience of getting back to the zone that I felt like I had experienced when I was bodybuilding, which was that intense release. But it was just, I think it taught me more of what I needed at the time. And but the point I'm making is it took me a while to get to the point where I was like really invested in running.
Right. You said 2 years, and I bet you that throughout this transition, at least within those 2 years, because bodybuilding there is a lot of ego going on, right? You lift heavy, you look big. How was to not having those things, right? You just said 600 pounds deadlift. That's like a very proud moment, like ego related. How do you think that the depression was also because of that?
Well, I think it's a few things. So like I said, what happened was the reason why we moved from Los Angeles to Dallas was I met this really successful entrepreneur. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in his industry in the whole country, in the whole world. And he's like, I've been thinking of having someone come move in with me and my wife and train us. And I was like, I could do that. Like, that seemed like a really great opportunity to learn from someone who's extremely successful. And it came up like, he's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And then I saw him again. We were in New Hampshire. I saw him again at like this cookout or whatever with some mutual friends. He's like, I'm really thinking of hiring someone to come do that. And I was like, all right, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If you want to learn anything, go to the source, go to the people who are the best. And I was like, this guy knows something that I don't about business, about wealth, about quality of life. And so I took this opportunity, and we stayed there for a month. It went fantastic. And he's like, hey, if you decide to move to Dallas, I'll hire you full time. And at the whole time, I'm trying to find my footing. Like, okay, my vision was to move to Los Angeles and compete in bodybuilding. I had built a really successful online company coaching people, and the online business was doing really well, but I was still like, am I like a lifestyle coach? Am I a business coach? Like, am I a bodybuilding coach? Like, there's all these different things, because now I had no surface. Like, I had nothing to stand on that really made me clear. And then you take the body, right? Like, I'm used to people coming up to me and being like, holy hell, like, how do I look like you? And at the time, like, I'd started getting like a small following. I was almost at like 10,000 followers, which is in 2018. So I was starting to get like some people like recognizing me, and there's all these little things. And then I kind of lost that. And so all these things kind of compounded. We moved to Dallas, and then there was this small moment where we ended up getting let go by the family. It ended up being temporary, but we got let go. And I was like, wow, like all the points of the ego, all the points of like self-worth, just this is not what I had planned. And when all those things stacked up, I found that the thing that I needed to do most was to get back in touch with what made me feel like I was at my best, which I talk a lot to my clients about, like, what is your powerful base? Like, what's your emotion that allows you to feel the best? And for me, it's this state of passion and joy. And I get that when I do something physical. And so what I recognized was that I loved bodybuilding, not just because I liked how I looked and felt, but it was deeper. And I think that if you look at yourself and you ask the deeper question of like, okay, what do I actually feel when I do this? It's like, there's nothing more empowering than going all out on a set, right? Like when you do a squat and you're like, you almost feel like you're going to die. Like that is, for me, that was something I learned very early on. Like if I push myself to that level, like there's no better feeling. Yep. And then after I stopped training, I kind of lost that. And so I think that having something that kind of got me back in touch as to why did I actually love bodybuilding in another avenue allowed me to kind of sidestep that ego, because you can't keep your body. It's more of like, what are you actually pursuing through that work?
You're still lifting, right? Just not the same type of training that you used to do.
Like in like my current life.
Yes.
Yeah, I still work out. I still train 4 or 5 days a week, but I'm like, when COVID happened, all I had was a 30-pound dumbbell and some tens, and but like I still deadlift. I can still bench over 200 and whatever pounds. I think that the maintaining the strength has been fairly easy. It did take some adjustment for the training to kind of cater towards what I did with the run.
And for the run, do you just need to really run, or do you still to continue to build more muscles around your legs, or not really that much? I mean, how did your training change for the marathon?
So for me, I kind of built up to that ultra marathon. So an ultra marathon is 62 and a half miles. You run that in less than 24 hours. So I built up to it after that half marathon. I did a marathon that year. The next year I did. Oh, next year was COVID. So when COVID hit, I kind of was like, all right, like, I'm not reliving the year that I just had again. So I started running more and more. And by the end of that year, I was pacing around about 30 to 40 miles per week. But I was really intentional about starting to add in more yoga, starting to add in more isolateral movements. So making sure that I was training like if I was doing stiff legged deadlifts, for instance, focusing more on single leg movements, just really trying to balance out my body. And when it came to actually focusing on strength training, I was very intentional about, when it came to leg training, not trying to go for mass, but just trying to keep the strength that I'd already had in my glutes and my hamstrings, so I could push the body and stay healthy.
And when was the ultra marathon? It was this year, 2021.
Yeah, so I ran the ultra marathon in April this year.
And how was the experience?
It was unlike anything else. Imagine feeling the greatest that you've ever felt and the weakest you've ever felt, and the most amount of bliss and joy and guilt and pain and suffering at the highest capacity over the course of 16 hours. It was this really unique experience, because at first I was like, I have no idea what this is. I'm not a runner. I was never a track athlete. So I'm at this place where, like, these people who do ultra marathons, like, these people are runners. Like, they get after it, and that's what they do. And I'm probably the biggest person running this thing. Like, I'm still 205, 210 pounds. And at first I was just cruising. Like, the first 30 miles, I'm passing people. I was in third place for the first 30 miles. And then there's this point where you have to climb up this, like, 1 mile high mountain and then climb back down it. And I'd kind of jacked up my knee, and all of a sudden the pain started to set in, and I was like, whew, we're going to be out here for a long time. Like, this is, like, my pace started to really come to a standstill, and it started to set in that I was not going to hit the pace that I had originally set out to do. And to make matters worse, it was my fiance's birthday. And so I had and she's there with me. Like, she's not running the race, but, like, I was like, hey, you know what? Because I paced it based off of what I thought I could do, all the training I had done. I had run over 1,000 miles to get ready for that run. So I was like, okay, this will take me 12 hours, 14 hours. We'll get out of here at like 9, then we'll go and get dinner, and it was like, we'll have a good day out of it. And we had planned. She's in really great shape, so we had planned on her joining me for, like, the last 10 miles, because you can have a pacer for the end. So we're kind of have this game plan, and, like, at 30 miles, I was like, oh shit, like, this isn't gonna happen, and I'm a really awful fiance. Like, this, like, it. So, like, now I'm at this point where, in my back of my mind, I'm like, well, I already ran 30 miles. Like, you've already run 30 miles. Like, you're not a runner. like in all the weakness, all the judgment, all the guilt, all the things that you say, like avoid saying to yourself when you're really wanting to quit, all that starts coming to the surface. And it was interesting because you don't really get to discover those things about yourself until you go as far as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And that was really my intention behind doing it. I wanted to see how far the body and the mind and the spirit put together can really push to hit that target. And so as I kept running, as I kept going through the race, there came this point where on the last 15 miles, Lindsay came out and joined me. And it was just like, I remember talking to her, being like, we're trying to keep the pace, but everything's kind of going slow at this point. I got wicked dehydrated and I almost passed out on the top of the mountain. And it was just this moment of coming back together and being like, I've never felt so weak. And it was such a far departure because the first 30 miles, I'm like at my peak. I'm like, I've never experienced this. And it was kind of this point of recognizing that there's always something more, and that you can always do something more after that point.
Yeah, you brought a great point about the mind and body. Because with bodybuilding, mainly when you are prepping to a show, it comes to that couple of last weeks prior to the show that you are so tired all the time, feeling weak and all that. So there is a lot of mental toughness going on at that last 2 weeks. And for you on those 16 hours, after you realize that, oh my God, this is not going to work as I planned, then it was more mental toughness than physical, right?
Yeah, there came points where I was, okay, hey, we got to do this, we got to push. But I had learned that through bodybuilding, and I had learned that same mindset of, hey, you're 2 weeks out, you're 3 weeks out, whatever amount of time, a week out, and that's where the growth comes from, right? That's where you actually develop. And my favorite part of the experience, because at the towards the end, I was I got passed a couple times and just feeling like a little defeated, right? Because you're in the moment of like, whew, like, I was expecting this to be, I wasn't expecting it to be easy, but you just never know how bad it's going to be until you're there. And there came this point where I think I ended up finishing 6th out of 13. And there was this one person who was coming up behind me, and like we were like maybe 5 miles, 6 miles out, and I was like, all right, like I will be damned if I allow, and not even like this person beats me. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I'll if I don't finish as hard as I can, like if I will leave here feeling defeated if I don't finish strong. And so the last 5 miles, we ended up hitting a solid 11 minute pace or so on, and we just picked up, and the whole thing is like through this massive canyon in Caprock Canyon in Texas, so it's a pretty rough terrain, but we finished strong, and I got done and I was like, wow, I just ran 62.5 miles in under 17 hours.
And how was the weather? Was good to run, or was it was a little hot?
The weather was cool. It was actually cold because it was actually a really cold day. There was it was like 32, it was like 36 degrees when we started at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Yeah, so it was pretty chilly. And then towards the evening, I mean, I was pretty bundled, so it was okay. But I wore shorts. I had Under Armour on, like long sleeve. It was not what you would typically think of running in the desert in Texas would be like.
And why do you believe you got dehydrated? You didn't have enough water?
Yeah, I think it was so they have these different stations like 4 like miles apart or 5 miles apart or whatever. And I had like 2 water bottles on me, and I had been drinking water the whole time, but at one point I had these 2 things of water, and we passed the last GO station, and I drank like 1.5 of that, or like half of one. And I was like, I think I'll be okay to make it through the rest of it. And I just made a bad judgment call. I just needed, I think what it also was is I was taking in more sodium than I was replenishing with water. And so at this point I was taking in sodium tabs, and I was going to the bathroom a lot because the amount of sodium I was taking was causing my body to flush out the additional sodium. And I think that those 2 things combined caused me to get dehydrated. And I remember we were making our way up the mountain, and I started to recognize my body. Like, I have this thing I recognize in myself. If I'm dehydrated, I'll start to like yawn. And as I started to yawn, I was like, okay, that's usually a sign that I'm going to get sick. And once I get sick, that's usually really bad, because now the way, like, I just have a weaker stomach, so I can't keep anything down. So we were about 2 to 3 miles out from the next rest stop, and it's getting dark. We have our headlamps on, and it was just this point where I kind of we didn't say it. Me and my fiance didn't say it to each other, but we're like, hey, like we're either getting off here. Like, there's no other alternative. We don't have cell service. There's no, like, you have to get off the mountain. So yeah, just had to make the way through, and we ended up making it down the back, and like there was like this little like camp area, water area, and I was really grateful when that happened.
And this was the first time you've done that, right?
Yeah, so this is the first time I'd ever run an ultramarathon.
Now that you've done, and you can recognize your flaws and things that you should have done you didn't do because lack of experience and everything, would you change some of your strategy going to preparing or even during the race?
Yeah, I would have gone slower at first. I would have paced myself. I was running at probably like a 9 to an 8 minute pace, 8 minute mile pace. I would have brought it back to probably top 9 to 10 and just maintained that consistently. I would have gone, I think maybe not even that too. I would just gone slower on the downhill, because I think that was really where I made the error, was not being mindful about my footing when I was going down the back hill of the mountain, and it was all shaky rocks.
That's when you injured your knee?
Yeah, and it wasn't like a massive injury, but it was enough to then throw off the rest of my hip, throw off the rest of my footing, and it just kind of worked its way up. And that made it really harder to keep running. But yeah, I think that the biggest thing I would have paced myself a little bit better going into it, and then I would have slowed down going to the back. Because I think it's like anything else, you really don't know until you've done it. So but I end up, like I said, I still finished 6 out of 13, and I think
it's good. It's really good.
You can't. It's like, how would I wouldn't have known, because you can't cue in on all those different pieces, right, because it's just a lesson. But I certainly would have slowed down.
So you never really hire any coach or anyone to help you with the prep for that?
No, because I didn't do it to win. I didn't do it because I thought that I wanted to try to be top 5, top 3. I did it because I wanted to see how far I could push my body and my mind, and I have enough knowledge to create my functional training and my eating around that. So I was really intentional, like using my bodybuilding skills. I was intentional about tuning into how many carbs I was eating before a race, or what foods I was eating before a race, reducing any dairy, reducing any like gummies or sweeteners or things like that. But it's the alternate, right? You think of that, like, I don't want to eat those things in bodybuilding because I don't want to retain water. But if you really actually think about it, what you really don't want is, you don't want inflammation in your body, right? So any of the things that you're going to be getting, anytime you're inflamed, you're going to retain water. And so for me, that inflammation I can feel in my joints. So if I was eating a lot of, like, let's say ice cream, and then I would go and run the next day, it would drastically impact my joint health. It would impact how I felt. Impact the way that I was able to perform. So I really had to tune into what foods I was eating, but I did reference like different. I did my research beforehand. Like I listen to a lot of different podcasts, a lot of different runners. I kind of took a plan that was on the internet and I kind of tailored it towards what I needed with my specific training. And talking about ego, I didn't want to get small, so so I was like, I let my leg, like I remember Greg even said, "Hey, dude, like your upper body looks great," because my legs had come in so much. But no, I was intentional about still doing some kind of strength training 3 to 4 days a week, and just trying to maintain my upper body strength and my functional strength in my lower body too.
Did you eat throughout those 16 hours of the race?
Oh
A
yeah,
snack? What type of snack do you eat?
yeah. You're eating and you're drinking the whole day. Food wise, it was a lot of granola bars, a lot of honey, a lot of I don't like Gatorade, so I don't really drink Gatorade. But it was a lot of like electrolyte drinks, a lot of water. Then also more fruit like bananas. Trying to stick to personally like not eating candy, even though that was the most like frequent source of food that was there. But let's put it this way: I didn't. I think I lost 2 pounds running the ultra marathon. That's how much food I ate.
Yeah, because I usually lose 2 pounds when I go to jujitsu training, and
Yep.
it's like 1 hour only.
Yeah. So it was that you're replenishing your body the whole time.
Wow. And this is on those stations that you go through. They give you food, or you brought yours and you were carrying on.
Little bit of both. I had a pack that I kept with me, and that was easier to keep my 2 bottles of water. And then there were like 5 different stations that had snacks, fuel, goos, which I wasn't really a big fan of, like the goos and the chews and stuff like that. I tend to find that it just didn't feel good when I ate them. So that's kind of the thing is if you think about it as an athlete, it's also tuning into what feels best and like what helps your body perform best. So yeah, there was a lot of different like snacks. Like
And
that.
leading to the race, did you increase your carbohydrate intake, or you kept the same?
Yeah, so leading up to the race, I was eating about 300. I was eating about like 250, 300, 400 grams of carbs. The day of the race, I woke up and I had about 100 grams of carbs. And then even like before you ran the race, I still had about another 25 grams of carbs. So I did carbo load, but it's kind of the same thing as like a bodybuilding prep. Like that's why I think it was so easy to kind of just go into
Mm.
it. You're having like the last like 3 weeks out from the race, I had run one 35-mile race, and then I had run a 44-mile race 2 to 3 weeks beforehand. So I had practiced the hydration. I had practiced what I was eating. I had practiced what I needed to do halfway through that run in order to keep my hips mobile. Um, and then going into the last week, you tailor everything off, right? So you think of a bodybuilding prep, your first day on that deload week, you're doing maybe you're doing 16 sets, but you're not pushing the body very hard. And then the Tuesday you might do a back day and just kind of work through some of the muscles, really just trying to keep things tight. But you're not doing a whole
Right.
lot of training those days, at least if you've prepped right. And it was kind of that same thing. I still did a little bit of weight training, but I did a little bit more yoga, just trying to keep the hips open and really trying to stay loose. And by the end of it, just was time to go run.
Did you ever try to do a training that simulates that race? Because you said that you went up and down many times in the hill. When you were training, did you try to simulate that as well?
Yeah, I went to the specific place.
Oh, so you went to
So
the same place of the race. You went there just to train.
Yep, I went there just to train.
Oh.
So it's about 6 hours away from Dallas. My fiance and I took a trip out to Caprock Canyon. We ended up staying in Amarillo just based off of like where the location was in proximity. But I did a 25-mile run there, and I'd simulated because it's a different run than like a track, right? You're different shoes, different footing. So I had done that, and I whenever I had run, I tried to do a little more trail running as well. At least from, I would say, every 2 weeks, I would try to go and do like my long run.
And the reason why I asked this is because if you've done similar circuit, you probably pace yourself at least down the hill, not the same way that you did during the race that you end up injuring yourself, right? So
100%. Yeah. Well, so the thing that was interesting, you're 100% right. The way that I ran, so like this canyon, it's this massive, massive canyon. There's buffalo in it, so it's very, very cool. You get to see all these buffalo. You get to see all this wildlife. But when I went to run to practice, I didn't run the specific portion, like the exact specific portion that they had on race day. Everything else was the same. Like there was hills on the path that I had run, but there wasn't that part that went up that mountain face. And it literally was 1 mile up and 1 mile back all through the woods. And I just missed that point. So you very, and had I done that now and gone, like, let's say I was going to go do it again, I would be more intentional about that. But there's like 8 different trails you can run, and that was its own one.
Awesome. Brian, that was an amazing story. I'm glad that Greg invited you to the podcast. A lot of great insights, a lot of people that is transitioning from one sport to the other. Sometimes they have a hard time, and looks like you also did, but at least now you found something that you are passionate about and that you enjoy doing. So thanks a lot for taking the time to record this and to share your story.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And if I could add one thing, I think that it's if you're transitioning between sports, it's just building the small habits that get you there. Like I don't even consider myself like an ultramarathon runner. I'm not a marathon runner. I'm a guy who is really passionate about fitness and health, and this is one way to pursue that. So if you're transitioning from bodybuilding or even transitioning from running to bodybuilding, just build the habits around what you need to do, and it'll go smoother.
Awesome. Great tip. Thank you very much again, Brian. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining today's podcast. Stay tuned. We have more to come.